What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and I'm flying solo. Welcome to 2025, my friends. First of all, huge expression of gratitude for all of our listeners who have been with us in 2024 and before that. Oh, man. 2025 feels weird. It feels really weird to say it. I'm old enough where I remember like I was 21 in New Year's 2000. I remember that like distinctly. I worked at a nightclub in Santa Barbara, and that was Y2K, and it was a crazy year. But man, I'm like 25 years. It's weird to say that out loud and to like feel like I'm not old, and to also feel like that's a really long time to like be celebrating New Year's Eves not as a child either, right? So yeah, 25 years, crazy. 2025. Even crazier. But I wanted to talk a little bit about year in review. So every year on the first of the year, my family and I, we do a cold plunge where we jump into our pool. It's usually in the high 40s to high 50s. And yesterday it was 57, 58 degrees. So which is frigid. If people like cold plunge, that's some of you cold plungers like, oh, that's nothing. I do 39. I'm like, listen, man, I don't. So that's cold. But it's a really, I like the ritual. We've done it 4 years now in a row, 2022, 23, 24, now 25. And first of all, I'm here to say that I think rituals are really an important part of life. I had a guy that used to work for me. His family had a lot of rituals. They did the same trips every year, and they did the same parties. And I was always like, oh, that's cool. I just watching them do it over time. And so I started building a lot of rituals into my daily life and family life and yearly life. And this is one of the ones we built in that I really enjoy. It's something that it's on the list. We got to go do it. and it's a shocking moment, and the family doesn't. We take a picture together at the end, but it's weird. This year was like 24 was not what I expected. It was a harder year than I thought it was going to be, in ways I couldn't have imagined. And there was some really high highs, and there were some lows that were really low, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them, but yeah, it just reminded me, my biggest takeaway is that life is precious. We don't know when we're not going to have it. And I lost 3 really good friends this year. 3 people that were really powerful people that I really cared about. And powerful, I mean like their presence on earth was a very powerful presence. They brought a lot of value to everyone around them. These were just amazing. They're all men. They're amazing men. So first of all, I want to start off this episode by just, giving love to those 3 people. John Rulin, who I did a solo about a couple months ago, lost him in August. Rick Sapio, we lost last month, about 2.5 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, excuse me. And I'm going to be going to his funeral this weekend. And a coach of mine, Coach Robert Ellis, lost him on New Year's Eve, and 2 of them were fighting cancer. One was a young man, but it was a reminder that life is precious, right? That's like a big takeaway. And so, what's interesting with that is when you have those moments, these like really poignant moments where maybe you lose something or something, someone passes away, or there's a big life change that's a hard pill to swallow, and you butt that up against having a year where, maybe things aren't going the way you thought they were going to. A lot of challenges. For me, there was a lot of friction, and we'll talk about friction in a minute here. But and it just like you scratch your head a little bit, and you go, "Hey, man, is this what I want, right? Is this how I want to show up in the world? You know, is this the way I want to interact with the people around me? Are these the things I want to be doing? And so it was really interesting because in the past, I felt like, you know, if we're going to compare life to a game of like a video game, I feel like this was a huge level up year. Like I just transcended to a new level. And the reason for that is that I took these learnings because I feel like you kind of gather these learnings, you have these aha moments, and sometimes these beliefs get really strong and they crystallize, and it doesn't let you see the next level up because you're like, no, this is it. Like I figured it out. For me, like whenever there's friction, my first belief is that, oh, there's something from a values perspective that's like not perfect. And this was, you know, I wrote the book, The Core Value Equation. This was this was something that I really went deep on about 5 years ago. And I got really comfortable with that. I'm like, oh, okay. Like there's something misaligned from a values perspective with me and this individual or in this stuff I'm doing. And I need to go reevaluate why and see if I can reconcile it. Number one. And number two, it would be, I'll look at it and say, you know, is this true, right? Is this really a values issue? So I found myself doing that a lot this year in these different parts of my life. And the unlock, which is, there's this amazing book I'm reading right now called Leadership and the Art of Self-Deception, was that that's not necessarily true. And because what happens is a lot of the times we end up what's called in the box. And they talk about this in the book. And I was in the box a lot this year, right? Dave Emerald talks about like in the empowerment dynamic, this idea of being a victim, right? So when things aren't going your way, a lot of times we'll start to say like, oh, I'm going into the victim mode, right? And when that happens, we're in the box, as they talk about in Leadership and the Art of Self-Deception. And then it doesn't necessarily have to be a values play. It could be that that I'm actually like, I've made up my mind, or I crystallize a belief that's an untrue belief. And so, yeah, that's been something for me that's been really eye-opening, where it's like, oh no, man, I've been self-deceiving. Now, a couple of years ago, I was doing work with my friend Nathaniel Shawkin, and we were doing the work by Byron Katie, and I had a big aha moment then as well, which was that I'm willing to lie to myself over things to protect me from me. And so this wasn't a big, like, I wasn't like blown away by the self-deceiving thing, because I was like, oh no, I know I'll do that. I learned that a few years ago, that I will deceive myself to protect myself. So yeah, this was a big unlock, because I'm like, okay, cool. How do I show up better then? How do I get out of that victim mindset when things aren't going my way, the way I want them to go my way? When this relationship I have is offsides, how can I take ownership of how I'm showing up to actually create that, right? And so yeah, I like to dig into that today, because I think that this is something that we all do, where we will be in a situation and we won't take accountability for how we're showing up in it to create a better outcome. So before I go there, I want to talk a little bit about my 2024. So I started the year, and I had this big list of goals. I was going to read all these books, 30 books, read, meditate 300 times, 5,000 push-ups, run 250 miles, you name it. And those were all on my list. And I didn't do any of them. Now, in my own defense, I launched a new business last year. We raised a lot of money, and it was really like a stressful year. Like it was one of the more stressful, turbulent years as far as having something new, right? I hadn't had a startup in a while, right? You forget. It's like I think having a new business is like having a baby. Like anyone that's had kids will know what I'm talking about. Where you have the kid, and then you're like, about 3 years later, you're like, yeah, maybe we should have another one. And you're like, do you remember how hard it was the first time? You don't. You like. I think we're wired to forget hard things, or at least how the severity of how hard they are, so that we'll go do them again. And I hadn't had the startup in like 10 years, like a real startup, and I forgot how hard it was. And so it sucked the life out of a lot of these other things that were non startup related. They were not business related. Everything got focused on the business. And I mean, for me, I couldn't, I read a few books, but last year, like for those of you who remember, I read 52 books last year. This year, I think I really read 4 or 5, maybe, might have even been less. It really, I put down the books earlier in the year. Had a decent year in the gym, but I hurt my knee, in April. I had a really good, first couple months of the year were pretty good momentum with all that stuff, but I hurt my knee. And I'm just now, it's January, December, I just started like slowly jogging again. And this is not because I wasn't doing anything. I was like doing everything to try to fix it. And it just took, that's 7-8 months to get my knee healthy. And that really threw me off because I would listen to books while I would run. And then I stopped running because I was hurt. And then when I stopped running because I was hurt, I stopped going to the gym. When I stopped going to the gym, I stopped lifting. And it was a downward spiral, right? And that kind of threw a bunch of stuff off. The meditation was pretty good this year, which was good. And I needed it because I needed a lot of centering around just, having a new business. But yeah, it was interesting. Like that the business really took over. And, I've some friends who used to call this like a season of like a tough season of like hard work, right? Like last year was a season of like really grinding. And it was about 18 months long. It started, about June of 23, right when we really got hot and heavy on rise. And with the startup, there's this idea of like, I think it's like forming and norming, or storming and norming. So I was in the storming and forming phase of the business, and so it was just a lot going on there. But I made a list of just like what 2020 reminded me of, and I thanked 2024 for this, which was life happens while we're out making plans. I made all these plans to do all these things, and life just happened, And so normally I would beat myself up over this. I'd be like, man, you should have done better. You should have tried harder. You should have been more organized. And I didn't do that. I'm going to be a little vulnerable right now. I was kind of in the victim mindset of like not happy with where I was at with a lot of this stuff. And it carried over into a lot of my personal relationships. And so I had this moment like in December. I'm like, no, man, you got to take ownership of this. Like, what are you doing to show up? Like, and I think we do this a lot. We'll get really self-focused on like ourselves. Like, oh, it's all about me, and poor me. And I wasn't totally doing the poor me thing, but I was definitely self-focused. And so I made this big New Year's resolution, which was like, I'm going to make it all about others. Right. And the word I chose for this year is challenge. So I'm challenging myself to show up for others. I'm challenging myself to like ask myself, how am I showing up in the world to be there for other people the way they need, what they need. But a lot of stuff popped up. I'm going to go through my list. The next thing that came up on my list is that I'm not in control. I'm not in control, and I've talked about this in the past where, I've had some, I'm a big believer in God but I when at my worst, I'm egocentric and I want to control everything. And I realized, no, man, I'm not in control. There's a higher, at least I believe there to be a higher power, higher purpose that's driving, my direction. And when I get like in this mindset of trying to control stuff is when, I'm usually not at my best. So kind of surrendering to like, hey, like this is the path, right? Another thing I wrote down was resilience is easy to say and hard to do, right? I always consider myself a really resilient person, but in the moment when I'm having to deal with resilience, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of resistant, resistant to the resilience. So there takes like a lot of practice there, which is what can we do to practice resilience, right? Jumping in that pool on the first, that's I have to be resilient for 20 seconds or whatever it is. But it's doing hard things, right? Makes us more resilient. So ask yourself the question, what's the hard thing I'm doing to build up the characteristic of resilience within me? One could say like just doing my business was, but I think that there needs to be detachment from that. There needs to be like, what's something that I can program into my life that has nothing to do with something that's like I care about. I think cold plunging is a good example of it. I probably need to do more of that this year. For me, I like to do a lot of sauna, and I'll stay in there when I'm uncomfortable. But what can I do to make myself uncomfortable, even for like 2 minutes a day? What can I do? Hold a plank. What are the things I can do to make myself harder so that I can, when I'm in there, when I want to quit, I was talking to my son about this actually. Pablo, I've been teaching Pablo and Rumi. I just started teaching him how to lift weights. And I was telling Pablo, this happened, I learned this lesson when I was 16 years old, and I went to a wrestling camp at the University of Minnesota. So your mind will quit before your body does. Think about that. Your mind will quit before your body does. Why is that? It's because resilience. Like, we can always do more, but when things get hard, a lot of times we quit. And so resilience is easy to say, but hard to do. I wrote Life is Precious. I talked a lot about Rick and Robert and John, and to see people like that. These were, John was in his early 40s. Like, Rick just turned 60 like a year ago. Robert was in his probably early 60s. I mean, these are people that are young. Like, if you're really young, you'll think that some of that's old, but it's not. And to see amazing people living amazing lives perish like that really hit me. That, like, we're here for a short period of time. Like, we have to elevate. We have to make the most of it. We have to strive to live a purposeful existence. So if you're not doing that, like, it's such a waste of amazingness. And sometimes that comes easy. Sometimes that comes hard. So even though last year wasn't like the most fun year, I view it as probably one of my more successful years, because I got to see things I hadn't seen. I got to see things in myself that I didn't know were there, or that I had forgotten, and got to test myself in that way. And so for me, I think it was a big growth year, and I'm excited to lean into that this year, just with a fresher perspective. I wrote, my inner work is a continuum and not a destination. I think, again, I'm a person that's like this kind of results-oriented individual. And I had a friend that said that to me, and I was like, oh no, this is a continuum. I'm just always doing work on this. This isn't there. There's no there, right? Like, how can I be more mindful? There's more of that to have, right? How can I be more true to myself? There's more of that to have. How can I be more, graceful? Give myself more grace. There's more of that to have. How can I give others more grace? There's more of that to have. So it's, my inner work's a continuum. It's not, there's no there. I don't get there. I'm like, oh, I've found enlightenment. There is no such thing as that. There is none. There's always more, which is to learn and to have the, as they say, Shoshin, the beginner's mindset. I wrote, I have a lot to learn and probably always will. So it's just, that goes to that idea of Shoshin, having that beginner's mind that, like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know a lot. I know a little bit. And even what I learn, I'll probably learn more on top of what I've just learned. And I think that I got a little stale there. I think I got a little comfortable. You read 52 books and you're, I know a lot, You live a big life and you always feel like you're learning a lot, or that you know a lot. And for me, it was like this thing where it's like, whoa, man, maybe not, I learned about this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is the less you know, the more confident you are. The more you know, it takes time, right? And so we a lot of times we go into things, and especially with a startup and a new business and a new industry, I feel like the Dunning-Kruger effect kicked in for me a little bit, which was like, hey, I felt like probably a little bit overconfident going in, that I knew more than I did. And I learned, I learned a few big lessons there, which is like, no, you respect newness, respect what you don't know. Don't go in thinking you know everything. And so I checked that out. I might do a solo specifically on that, because it's a really interesting paradigm called the Dunning-Kruger effect. But check that out. I wrote, we're probably not as smart or as good as we think we are. Be humble. Yeah, I don't think I get a. I always say that I tend to be a vulnerable person, but I'm probably not a very humble person. I get really excited about me. I get really excited about my knowledge. I get really excited about mastery, and then I overexude it. And so it's like, no, maybe slow your roll, man. Slow your roll, dude. Like, maybe not. Maybe you need to, like, respect what you don't know a little more. I wrote, always consider that I can be wrong in almost any circumstance. Kind of goes back to that thing we're talking about around humility. Maybe like I'll come in with high certainty, but like, oh, leave the doorway open that I could be wrong, you know? And so that was a big lesson learned this year, which is maybe start with that. Like, hey, listen, I could be wrong, but, and then say what you're going to say. And you can say it with certainty, but by prefacing, framing it, saying I could be wrong, what you're doing, you're just setting up the listener to think like, hey, this guy's like open to feedback. He's open to, you know, not necessarily knowing, right? Because when we go in and say, oh, no, I know this, you're shutting everyone else down, you know? So for me, it's being open to the possibility that I may not, I could be 100% wrong, but here's what I think, right? This is an interesting one. So there's a series of books by the Arbinger Group that I'm reading right now. And one's called The Outward Mindset. I finished it last week. And they talk about seeing people as humans, right? Instead of objects. And especially when we're in like battle or we're like, you know, like want to be right, you know, and think of your personal relationships, think of your professional relationships, you know, especially with very ego-driven situations. A lot of times we want to be right. But having an outward mindset is where I just see like the other person as a human, like what are their needs? What are their objectives? What are they trying to accomplish? Because that's how we all kind of show up, right? And instead of like, what's in it for me, right? Like, because I found I have a tendency of doing that, right? Even though I have an awareness of like, hey, like people are very egocentric and like, how can you meet them where they're at? You know, as we talked about in conscious leadership, but yeah, you know, like, especially when we're in the heat of battle, like it's me versus them, you know, whether this is a significant other or like a child or your coworker or partner, you know, a lot of times we start to see people as objects, like, oh, that person is this, as opposed to, no, that person's a human. They just want to live a good life and they want to be out of stress and they want to accomplish great things. And how can you help them to get there? You know, that was a really like interesting lesson. So I really, by the way, I highly recommend the book, The Outward Mindset by the Arbinger Group. And last but not least, I wrote, there are no free lunches. Everything has a cost. There are no free lunches. Everything has a cost. Yeah, it's from anything. This is just I'm not going to get into details on this, but it was just, you know, something you hear it a lot, but it's another thing to live it. And for me, it's like, there's no free lunches, you know, if you get something amazing, like what it's coming at some cost, whether it's your time, whether it's your energy, whether it's, you know, you needing to level up to be a part of it. There's no free lunches, you know, so everything has a cost. So, anyway, those were big learnings. I know that's a lot to digest, but those are big learnings, and I wanted to share them with you because for me, those were my big takeaways for 2025. And for me, again, my word for the year for 2024, for 2025 is challenge. I have huge goals this year, like it's big, probably bigger goals than I've ever had. I'm not going to publish vanity metrics or goals like I have in the past. I'm going to basically just, you know, hunker down and quietly make some major things happen, and wish me luck. I'm going to need it because I'm going to be challenging myself pretty hard. I hope you, your loved ones, friends, family, level up, you know, go for that greatness, do so with some humility, and always consider the fact you could be wrong. With that said, peace out, everybody. We love you. Happy 2025. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, you know, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.